Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Not If, But When, Preparing You and Your Team for Productively Handling Difficult Situations, i.e. not how not to make a bad viral video moment. My name is David Gaines, and I am the owner of a coffee roasting company in Cincinnati, Ohio.
And I'm Mary Allard, and I also work with La Terza Coffee.
And we wanted to put this together just because so many people are in a heightened state of emotions, and these bad moments, these conflict interactions can happen very easily.
Yeah, the world is just textured right now with a lot of heightened emotions, whether it's COVID or homeschooling or you name it. And so really the intention in this conversation is to help to prepare everyone for not if, but when these situations happen. I first met David, my background being in specialty tea, natural foods, and running small emerging brands. I was in the tea world when David stumbled into our warehouse and was looking for a tea partner. What was cool about our friendship was that it became very instantaneous, that suddenly, tea conversations turned into how can we be better leaders and how can we be better colleagues and how can we be better people. So our conversations started to get very in-depth and very deep quick. And that started a friendship that has now turned into a working relationship. I'm fortunate that I get to be a part of the La Terza team, and I work mostly on sales and marketing of our online course that we sell to coffee shops to help them get started and enable them with everything that they need. Beyond that, I also run a consulting company for natural foods brands, and David and I are co-hosts on a podcast called The Third Place, which really touches on a ton of this content. And the feedback that we got from the episode that we started to talk about this was so positive that this is the reason why we're bringing it to you and your community.
So as I mentioned, La Terza Coffee is a roastery. La Terza is Italian, and the direct translation is the third. So Italian because we want to say, hey, Italy, thank you for inventing espresso. We really like it. But also there's just so many threes that show up in coffee. Coffee is grown. There's three major regions around the world where coffee is grown. We really try to stand on three pillars in our roasting philosophies: knowing the farmer, roasting in small batches, and delivering the coffee fresh. But ultimately, coffee shops are what we would call a third place. It's not your home, it's not your work, but here's this third place, this community living room where people can come and gather. And so the podcast is also this third place concept where it's my perspective and it's your perspective, and we come together and we look for this third, middle, gray, messy space. So many conversations can be had in the third place, and that's what we really are trying to achieve with the podcast and the topics that we talk about.
Right. So like I said, we had an episode on this topic along with 2 interviews because it was such a robust topic and so with the times. And we realized this is a really important thing. People want to be equipped with the information and the preparation to be able to handle conflict or to be able to handle things that can go messy really quick. So, we wanted to bring it to you and your community because we see the importance in it beyond just the personal relationship, but in the professional world. My background, like I mentioned, is in natural foods. I spent a long time being a manager to a coffee and a juice bar and also a tea shop. During that time, over the course of 6 years, I was called to diffuse many conflicts between customers and staff. I would be diffusing them daily, if not more, because the place that I was in was a hub of all different types of thought processes, all different backgrounds of people. And so there was a lot of times that you were faced with not knowing someone, not knowing where they were coming from, not knowing what state they were coming from and their core beliefs. And that created an unnecessary amount of tension that little things could go and blow up. So a little bit of, a peek inside my day would look something like this.
Good morning. Can I take your order?
Can I get a tall chai?
A large black coffee.
A what?
Large black coffee.
Do you mean a venti?
No, I mean a large.
He means a venti. Yeah, the biggest one you got.
Venti is large.
No, venti is 20.
Danny.
Yeah. Large is large. In fact, tall is large, and grande is Spanish for large. Venti's the only one that doesn't mean large. It's also the only one that's Italian. Congratulations, you're stupid in 3 languages.
Look, venti is a large coffee.
Really? Says who? Fellini?
How much is that? Here's a 10.
Do you accept lira, or is it all
You know
euros
what? Just
now?
keep the change.
I'm sure many of you have been on one side of that minor conflict going sour. And so why is this topic so important to us? Situations just like that.
Yeah. The world is just such a heightened place of emotions, whether you are in a pandemic or with the shutdown, COVID. Yeah, so much social distancing. Many people are trying to figure out schools and learning, whether that's homeschooling or everything's online, or nervous about sending kids back to school. Is it really safe? Whether we should wear masks or not. And if you're in America, the political scene is just really intense, and really it just other parts of the world as well. And the reality is we're also missing people. We're not able to spend as much time with each other. I'm trying to think through holidays and meetings and gatherings that with like parties that are not going to be happening over the next couple months.
Right. And so again, our goal really here is to host this webinar to not just empower you, whether you're a manager in customer service, or you are in customer service yourself, or maybe you know someone in customer service, or you've had that pass and you're wanting to be able to empathize with those around you when you're getting your weekly local food delivery because that's what you have invested in doing. Whatever it may be, we really want to help make sure that these difficult exchanges, that you feel equipped and prepared to do this, because like we've said, it truly is not if but when. And so really, in order to dive into this topic, we really have to understand what happens biologically, what happens emotionally and psychologically in these moments where we're posed with challenge. We all know it very well, that state of fight or flight. While even though I have a degree in contemplative psychology, we interviewed Sanam Klein. She's a cyber psychology expert and professor in the university. And she, on our podcast recently, put it so eloquently what happens to us when we're in the state of fight or flight, that I want us to give a listen and just a minute around what is happening, why is it happening, and what can we do to prepare.
Human beings by nature don't like confrontation. So when you look at evolutionary psychology, it's clear to see that one of the main principles that's helped us to survive as a species is really cooperation. So it makes sense that when it comes to having difficult conversations, it makes us uncomfortable, and it's almost a visceral gut reaction. So when we look at how our mind works, it's broken down into kind of like two ways of processing. We have a two-track mind. There's our conscious, rational thought. That tends to be our deliberate high road, and that's where we have our more reflective and rational thinking. So we can call it our rational cool brain. And this thinking takes place in the prefrontal cortex. But what many people don't realize or easily forget is that it's our unconscious mind that's actually 30,000 times more powerful than our conscious rational thought. And this part of our mind is the automatic way of thinking, which tends to be entirely intuitive. So we can call this our emotional hot brain. And this is where our feelings of fear, desire, anger, or the urge to respond to something impulsively come up. And this part of our mind often leads people to bypass the self-regulatory controls and self-standards we have in place just when we need them most. And this is where the fight or flight response comes from.
When we first interviewed Sanam, the thing that stuck out in that segment was just how we were hardwired to be conflict averse, that it was really for survival. And I never thought, I knew that people are always tending to avoid conflict. I never would have put it to that it was an evolutionary thing, that we are designed to be working together, and therefore we inherently try to avoid conflict.
Yeah, I mean, not only did that shock me, what really shocked me too was the 30,000 times more powerful, right? So if you didn't catch it, our emotional hot brain is 30,000 times more powerful than our logical brain when we're feeling threatened. And threat comes in all different types and forms. When I was managing a coffee shop, I used to joke that as a barista, you would see the worst and the best in someone in no time, within 3 minutes, because on many occasions, the customer is already coming in a stressed state. They haven't had their coffee yet. Maybe they're in a hurry. Maybe they carved this in because this is the only amount of time that they could come in, and it was their only act of self-care for the whole day because they had 8 hours of meetings. Maybe that's been you. Maybe they've never even been to that shop before. They're unfamiliar with the brand. They don't know what it is, but the coffee shop has been a sense of safety. And a lot of these places, especially food service, there's routine there and there's a sense of safety. So in that moment, when someone's coming in a stressed state, there's a lot more opportunity for things to go sour. That's not even mentioning the other side of the puzzle, which is the customer service representative or those in hospitality and food service and everything that they're handling that's on their plate. Maybe they have a list of 20 things that they have to get done, and they're trying to be present and trying to give the most, but at the same time, that also doesn't even acknowledge everything that's going on in the world right now that is brought to the workforce, that comes with you, that sits on your shoulders. So there's stress happening in every single angle. And this makes for a recipe for disaster where there's potential for threat that's way, way, way more likely. And so over time, you realize that like people are coming to your environment, whatever business you offer, to feel safe. They're looking for familiarity, especially now. They're looking for routine. And I think that we all know that ultimately, whether we're the customer or the person serving the customer, that people just want to be heard and they just want to be seen. And so how do we make that exchange turn into an exchange where people feel heard and seen, when especially there's no relationship that's been established prior?
Right. I mean, conflict is already hard enough when we know someone. And so many people that are in the customer service, it's the level of relationship could be instantaneous, right? And even if you do have a regular customer, like if you are a barista or a bartender that sees someone on a regular basis, there's still probably a layer of a relationship that's only surface level. So conflict is hard, and you're dealing with people that who knows what they might be dealing with on the outside world, where anything can trigger something very quickly to heighten the emotions. And so when you're in that customer service setting, how can you engage with that customer really quickly? Prior to COVID, we were already seeing loneliness at all-time highs, suicide at all-time highs, drug addiction at all-time highs. And that was all before the pandemic. Now that we're in the middle of this pandemic, we're seeing even higher rates for all of those things. So for many people, just that human connection, I think, is just so important. And while deep levels of relationship are more important, clearly, than surface level relationships, I think it's important to point out that even though it might be a surface level relationship or an instant level relationship, that level of relationship is still really important. And what you can be doing as a customer service to even diffuse conflict before it begins, what is to make eye contact, to know someone's favorite drink, to smile. And if you're wearing a mask, like, you can still smile with your eyes right now, and truly get to see that person. Because like Mary just said, we all have this innate desire to be seen, to see and to be seen, to know and to be known, and ultimately to love and be loved. And we can do that in this customer service setting.
Right. And so in leading many teams, Dave and I have found that, by preparing, that's really your best asset, because by failing to prepare, you're preparing to fail. So we found that this factor is the most important, because otherwise it's really, really challenging to access that muscle memory to get to a place where you can actually find safety, be able to come with your full self, be able to diffuse a situation, and to be able to make what seems like a negative interaction turn into a positive one. So really, we need to stop feeling like we're assuming if something's going to happen and start to realize it's when it happens, because it's already happening. Viral videos are everywhere right now, where people are not feeling heard and not feeling seen. And then that becomes a collective feeling. And we have to make sure that we stay grounded and have the ability to do that through preparation tools that are very, very seamless, so that we can find that homeostasis and really bring everything down and not make a bad viral video moment. You want positive ones.
Right. Later in the episode with Sanam, where we interviewed her, she shared one of the best tools that you can do in a conflict situation is not to raise your emotional temperature up to match the other person. So if someone comes in hot with that hot brain that she mentioned, try to do everything you can to stay in this cool space. Because if you elevate to meet the other person, then everything's going to stay up really high. Versus if you stay down here and fight that urge, it forces the other person to come back down to you. And the reason why, again, the preparedness is so important, when you know that this is the kind of thing that will happen at some point, you can be prepared, you can even practice and bring that temperature back down. And that alone, by being prepared, will help you be able to remain calm because you're expecting it. I wanted to point out, conflict can actually, in a business setting, in a customer relationship setting, it actually can be a time to really establish your brand and add credibility. So if you handle conflict really well and you take care of the situation really well, that sometimes your most loyal customers will come from these conflict moments. So Merrill is a brand of shoes that I really like. And I have a moment where I bought a pair of shoes. I didn't wear them very often. They were summer water specific shoes, but over like a year and a half old, they broke, but I barely used them. So to me, they were a high quality brand. I emailed the brand and just said, hey, look, I know that there's no warranty here, but the shoe really should have lasted longer than this. This part should have lasted. And they broke all of their rules and they sent me a new pair of shoes. And now I'm like Merrill shoe wearer for life because they went above and beyond to take care of a situation.
Yeah, I feel like most people probably have a relationship to some, positive customer service situation where it went bad and it had the opportunity to go really well. And then it created this, like, it's like working out a muscle, you kind of tear it apart and then when you build it back, it builds back stronger. So I always relate these situations to that theory where it's like, if you're just thinking of it as like something to repair, then it can be something that's so much stronger. And it just comes back to empathy. So really what we're going to talk about a lot is like, how do you prepare? It's empathy. Empathy finding tools is really what we've found is to be the most potent, because we all feel threat on the daily. It's outside of the workplace. It's at home. It's everywhere. One of the most common times that we feel threat, maybe you're not driving as much because you're working from home and it's more remote, but that doesn't change that traffic is rampant. I live in Colorado and traffic is crazy regardless of the pandemic. So during that, you've been there. Someone cuts you off in traffic and then you spiral. Whether you have a response that is anger response, you might have a panic response, a sense of fear. You might think, I was potentially going to be in an accident, whatever it may be. You biologically respond in that fight or flight way where you're having sweaty palms. You may have the heart rate pick up. You may have repetitive thoughts or go back to a state that is not as logical. It's going to go, you go into that emotional hot brain. So you're really leading with emotions and not by facts. And so one of the things that we really have discovered and found to be helpful to find empathy in those moments is, how can you default to be that person that says, what if that person that cut you off was actually someone that you loved? What if that person that cut you off or almost put you in an accident, or someone else in an accident, was a family member or a dear friend, and maybe they were rushing to the hospital. Maybe they really needed to, and it was not an intention or an explicit thing against you. It was not a threat that was intentional. And so how do we find that generous perspective? And some of the work that we've done is we've created a visualization around how can you find generous perspectives. David has shared a story with me recently about how he found a generous perspective for something that is very current, and I'd love for you to share it.
Yeah. Well, Donald Trump is our current president, and obviously there are people that love him and there are people that hate him, and there's not really a lot of people in the middle. And for me, like, I struggle with sometimes our president's behavior and his actions. But his niece recently wrote a book And it told the story of 2-year-old Donald Trump. And that, his family life wasn't very good, that there was some trauma when he was 2, that his mom kind of really abandoned him and he didn't have a lot of parental support. And so for me, not that it would excuse any of the behaviors that I might disagree with, or however you might think about that, but for me to visualize Donald Trump as a 2-year-old being separated from his parents helped me to see the human side of who Donald Trump is. And it was also, this is something that's also very personal for me, because here's my 2-year-old son, and I have a 2-year-old right now. So when I think about what it would be like if he no longer had a parent support system around him, I would be absolutely heartbroken and devastated. And so that helped me to maybe just put empathy into a person that maybe a lot of people don't have empathy for. And I think Mary's in really the same position.
Yeah, I can't relate more. I think that just the act of becoming a parent starts to make you realize that everyone has a mom or a dad, and everyone has their story. And so, what that makes me realize is that just really having that ability to humanize people in a very quick moment is important. And what's at the core of being human is like, how can we find connection, right, David?
Yeah. I mean, humanizing is the whole thing. When we talk about empathy, when we talk about visualization, connection is just the core of love and relationships. And the more that we can connect, and the more quickly that we connect, the more that we can move past that fight or flight response. Again, we all just want to love and be loved, to know and be known. And when we can keep that connection in mind, when we can humanize as quickly as we possibly can, learning that as a practice is really just a great start to handling any conflict, whether it's something that happens very quickly or even in your deep relationships.
Right. So how do we find connection with someone in a super quick way? There are 2 tools that we've found to be really helpful. One of them is just, well, both of them are revolved around the language that you use and the power of language and the power of our spoken word. So the first one being, I wish. I wish is saying, I commiserate with you. And it immediately can diffuse a situation and help the person that's feeling threatened say that I hear you, I get it, I'm actually on the same page as you. And then it also can help the person that's maybe exuding some threat realize, oh, right, they do hear me. They also relate. They may not have option, though they relate. One of my best or favorite examples of this is like, I wish I didn't have to wear a mask either. Right? I don't know if I've ever heard someone say, I wish I could wear a mask. I think it really comes down to like, yes, someone comes into your place of business or into your home, and we're all faced with like that sort of gut response of saying, hey, here's my boundary, and here's my way of saying what I need from you. I wish that I didn't have to wear a mask either, but I would like you to wear a mask, right? Another thing is, if you've ever done any training or education around negotiation or sales, there's a whole world around the language of mirroring back. Mirroring back is when you hear someone's feelings and you relate with them, or you hear their words and you relate with them. You literally echo some of the last couple of things that they said. Maybe they said, I'm thinking that I would like to find this shirt, or I'm thinking that I would like to try this drink. It's important that we acknowledge that that means that they're coming from a more logical thinking place. And you can say, I think that you would like something that's more of the logical. Read them down the menu rather than tell them this will make you feel this way. Or take them to a part of your store or through a part of the process that encourages that thinking side of them. And really try to pick out, what are the words that they're using? Are they using feeling words, or are they using thinking words? Mirror them back so that they feel like, you know what, this person's speaking my same language.
I think that that's really important, because when we usually do process information either in that logic space or in that feeler space. And when we talk, we almost exclusively use those words. I really think that, I really feel that. So when you listen for those 2 words to be used, that it makes sense to mirror back with the same words. So like you said, if someone says, I really think that it would be a disservice to say, oh, it sounds like you feel like you're having a bad day, you know, or whatever it might be. All the wires are crossed. So to
Right.
match the think word with a thinking response, to match a feel word with the feeling response, I think is a really interesting practice to begin.
Yeah, and I mean, really what this calls on is for you to be a conscious listener, right? And to be present. And it's hard to be present in a world where we're very much inclined to be on our technology. You know, being present is probably a muscle that we don't exercise as often. And so how can we really ensure that we're being present and consciously listening so that we can pull out and pick apart those words so that we feel like we are equipped with the capacity to mirror that language or to make sure that someone feels heard or feels seen? It really comes down to like practicing moments of pause.
Yeah. On our podcast, we say this often, just the idea of being present. And maybe even right now, we can just pause. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about a hard topic and we're probably stirring up a lot of emotion. So maybe just breathe for a moment. I think when we think through these tools, that breath could be one of the quickest things that every one of us can do to immediately lower that temperature in the room. If someone starts to raise it, what's it look like to try to pause, take in that deep breath, and then engage?
Right. And so breathing is super simple. I mean, it comes pretty naturally, but at the same time, we're pretty conditioned to actually forget about our breath. So it's important to just remember that you can just take a breath, and even in that, that can, you know, like for example, my toddler, whenever he's feeling very rampant, I tell him to try to find his calm body, and that means, can you take a deep breath? And by him taking a deep breath, I'm reminded to take a deep breath. And it's so, something so simple can be so potent where, can you imagine if you were serving someone or you were connecting with someone that was charged and you took a deep breath? Observing you take a deep breath and find a grounding place will probably encourage them to then also mirror you back, right? So beyond that, another tool that we have is the power of role playing and of visualization is a part of it. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to create muscle memory. We're trying to make really easy things be easy for you to tap into when you're in a state of fight or flight, because what we've learned is that the fight or flight state is pretty powerful. So how do you overcome the powerful fight or flight state? By doing role playing, by let's say you're a manager in a restaurant. A lot of times staff are onboarded and they walk through different scenarios, they run through, they memorize the menu, they memorize a ton of things. But what's not worked into the onboarding is the ability to know what to do and what are your resources when things don't go right. How do you face that conflict? So what David and I created was a short script that can help walk people through, whether it's personally or professionally, when something goes awry, and how do you bring it to that productive state that's going to strengthen that muscle. And then beyond that, how can you make sure that you're doing it repetitively so that it replaces your fight or flight response and starts to actually take place over that and be more productive. And so that the first thing is really like recognizing, like, are you in a state of threat? And then remembering, okay, I've practiced this. Practice and preparation are one of the greatest gifts that we can have. And it's really an opportunity for us to strengthen relationships. So while it's an opportunity, we're not saying that you should just be ran over. It's important that you know when to set a boundary. And we have identified that there's really 3 signs to setting a boundary. The first one may be, if you're in customer service, the first one may be the person is repeatedly asking for upper management or a manager or someone above you, whatever. They just want someone above you. They want to feel like they're really being seen and heard, and they just need to have the power that they're coming from be matched with the power of the structure in your business. The other thing is when maybe you yourself are not able to stay in a grounded place. That's okay. It's important to know that you have the ability to make sure that you can get to a safe place. And so sometimes just truly changing the environment can be all that you actually need And it is an act of saying, okay, I'm going to remove myself. Maybe removing yourself or bringing someone else in is all that it needs to shake up the situation and reset. The other sign of setting and needing to set a boundary is that the um, the person that's posing the threat is getting increasingly more threatening. So they're actually charged by your distaste for the situation. They're charged by the fact that you're feeling grounded. They're charged by your empathy, whatever it may be. Everything, you've exhausted these tools, and you feel like no matter what, you can't find a grounded place. And so this is really, we encourage you to say no here, and to set a boundary. And so, there's some tools in the coffee shop of how to set boundaries, and there's other tools. And David, I think that you've been really good with your leadership to empower other people and some of these tools to saying no. What do they look like?
Right. Yeah. Again, this really is that opportunity for that long-term customer. And when you can empower your team and your staff, I think that there's lots of things that they can be gifted with being able to diffuse the situations themselves. But even if they can't, like if that, like Mary was just saying, the emotions keep getting higher and higher, it still can be an opportunity. So there was just a story that just happened this weekend in Cincinnati, which is the city that I live in. There was a party at a wine store that was asked to wear masks, and they refused, and they were asked multiple times to wear masks. And eventually it did escalate to a point where they asked the party to leave. And on the way out the door, they broke some glasses, they made a big scene. And so that was a lost opportunity for that customer. Clearly, they're no longer going to come back and visit that location. However, that made news, and everybody else has flooded in to support this business because they have acknowledged that the customer was in the wrong in that situation. So still turned into an opportunity for long-term customers. But when you can empower your staff, I think there's lots of really great ways to do that. Creating those opportunities, for example, what does it look like to give a free drink? Or can you empower your employees, depending on what business that you're in, to be able to give away up to a certain dollar amount, something that would appease the customer, and they have the authority to be able to do that without asking for the manager. That's one thing that you can do. You can empower your employees to walk away, to, okay, I do need to pause and I do need to go grab the manager, and that can create that pause moment. And the third is, they are there to best serve and represent your brand, but there certainly are times where they have permission to come get you, the manager, or you, the owner, to help diffuse the situation a little bit differently. So those are three ways that you can empower you or your team to be able to handle situations as well.
Right. And so we really hope that, just even spending the time and energy to think about incorporating that into the way that everyone operates, so that you feel prepared and that you prepare those that work around you. Some of the tools that we touched on today are simply just taking a deep breath, having a moment of pause, letting yourself get out of that emotional hot brain. Another tool is the tool of role playing. Like, send us your email, touch base with us, and we will send you a script to help you walk through. There's a lot of fun to be had. As kids, we were always acting and playing. And that's because it really does imprint things into your brain. And it helps you have your memory or remembrance around things when you create play and fun around it. So scripts can really be helpful for this. Another thing is using this visualization tool that we did. So it's only 5 minutes. It helps you access a generous perspective. It helps you get to a place of like, okay, I'm feeling threatened. How can I help this person that's maybe making me feel threatened? How can I see them in a positive light? How can I find empathy and connection with them when it feels like there's none to be had? And then finally, there is such a thing as setting boundaries, and it's important to set boundaries. We're not saying lead with empathy to the point that you're feeling abused, or you're feeling like you have no voice, or you're not safe and you're not feeling heard. We want it to be a mutually beneficial thing. So see this as an opportunity to strengthen a relationship, to strengthen your connection, whether it's in the workplace or at home, and know that there are really, really small micro tools that you can do to make that happen that can make great impact.
Yeah. And I think that that's a really great point, the micro tools and even micro moments. Like, so these are all great tools that we can use, but what does it look like to put those into regular practice? Like a big conflict that is not required to put these tools into practice. We have interactions with people all day long, every day, and we can start to implement these tools on a regular basis. And I think that that's really also great practice, because when we live this out in the small moments, it sets you up for success in those big moments. So this has been a great conversation. Really happy that you've participated. Hopefully you've learned something. This is actually part of a bigger program that we run called a Coffee Accelerator course, and it's designed to help people that are in all stages of opening a coffee shop, either from the beginning stages, or you have a coffee shop, but you want to make sure that you're profitable, or you want to become more profitable. And we have this platform that you can come check out.
Specifically for our Global Coffee Fest community, we're really wanting to offer it to you at a discounted price. Our registration is open right now. We already have many members of the cohort, so if you can save your seat, typically it's valued at over $5,000. We sell it for around $3,000, and we're taking an additional 10% off for our Global Coffee Fest community. And we would love for you to join our cohort, which is virtual and only over the course of a 4-week period.
Yeah. And really thank you for doing what you do. Opening a coffee shop, or running a coffee shop, or managing a coffee shop, being a barista is hard work, but it also is critical. The reason why we put this course together is we want to make sure that everyone has the best business tools possible, so you can be profitable, so you can open more spaces, because people just connect over tea and coffee and any beverage. And we have to have better conversations. We have to have better dialogue. So for the social health of our global community, we want to see more coffee shops open. So that's really the heart behind this course.
Right. So thank you. Please send us your email. We would love to give you these free tools that we've made, the visualization and the scripts. And we'd be also happy to do 15 to 30 minute sort of downloads and address with you what are some of your current pain points. How can you be equipped to be prepared for the heightened emotional state that we're all in right now?
Yeah.
Thank you, and be
everyone.
well.